In these COVID times, it's often difficult to enter a new country and to come back from this country. So I prefer to just do the border crossing in the air. This is the story of an awesome winter flight. Sometimes nerve-wracking, sometimes painfully slow, but it's the sign of a new season coming, of a new awesome XC season that has begun. So we're in February and this is a bitter cold winter day, but the lapse rate is good and there are some nice thermals to be had, even this early into the year. So we're in the southern Alps climbing on south-facing slopes, and you can see there is still a lot of snow around. Just the lowest parts are free of the snow, and the trees are also cleared of the snow and start produce some thermals. The thermals are not very strong, so I do have to climb and take my time and turn and turn and turn. So this is a good opportunity to share my knowledge on how I select slopes for good thermals, or if I choose to skip some part of the slope and head to the next point because I expect better thermals over there. So when selecting a slope to climb on, I look that it faces the sun, but I also look at how much terrain is underneath me. So in this case here you can see it's quite a large slope, but it has kind of a break in the middle. And you will see that with my friend climbing underneath, he actually takes the thermal that triggers off this little break underneath me. So overall this slope can just heat up in the bottom part and trigger there, and heat up in the top part and triggers there. So better would be a continuous slope as we have here, because there is no break in the slope and all the warm air travels up the slope and continuously heats and heats and heats. And when it finally reaches the top, it will be much warmer and there is a much better thermal to be expected. So this is one point that I often look at, how much slope is underneath me. If the slope is very large, chances are also very high that you find a strong thermal. If there's only a little slope, then the chances are much slimmer that you will find a good climb, just because there is much less terrain that is in the sun and that can heat up. I'm climbing on this good south-facing ridge. There's a large slope and I can slowly get up higher. So it's still very early in the season, so I cannot really expect very strong thermals and just have to take what is there. Soon I have to do a valley crossing, so I want to max out my altitude in order to arrive as high as possible on the other side. Overall we're flying very low. Usually we are almost 1,000 meters higher when we fly in this region. But it's so early in the season, so there's not many valley winds that are active, and we get away with this really low flying style. So this is a good opportunity to also touch a bit on the mental side of paragliding. I remember when I was just starting, or even the first few years that I was flying, I was always looking where I could land. And this was very justified because I didn't have the skills, or I couldn't guarantee if I could stay in the air. So I always needed a landing field within my view. And you can see there at the bottom there are plenty of good looking landing fields. So this is not an issue here. But soon we will cross into the Centa Valley. And there is just a lot of trees around, and at the bottom there is just a gorge and there is almost no space to land. On top of that there is a kind of spider web made out of cables at the bottom of this valley. So when I just started flying, I would have just used all my focus, all my brain power to find landing zones down there. And probably I would have also turned around because there really aren't any. But nowadays I know much better my skills. I know the day, I know that I can stay in the air and I can enjoy thermaling with my friends even though there are not many landing options at the bottom. Not having to think about landing options also frees up a lot of headspace that I can use to find better thermals, to analyze the wind, to analyze the conditions, to look at the terrain and find other good climbing opportunities. This is a key thing in almost everything in life, I think. If you progress at something, you can draw more of your focus to the really important questions and you don't get distracted so much by things that are not so important at the moment. So I actually have time to be fully present and just enjoy the beautiful colors of this day. I mean, reliving it, watching the video, it just gets me excited all over again. These really white trees at the top that have been in the fog, that have these snow deposits on there, and the brownish colors of the slope and the mixing together. It was just quite amazing, and you only get this in winter time. So in the first part of the flight that we have seen, I was not getting very high because there was a visible inversion. But now we are more into the mountains, the valleys are much narrower, and here there is the potential for the inversion to break or that I can just surpass it by climbing close to the slope. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. So I'm climbing higher and higher and I can actually sneak through the inversion and get up above it for the first time in this flight. And it's really a bitter cold day, so we had up to minus 15 degrees in the air. So even with big large mittens it was really cold in the air. Just flying along these cliffs is quite awesome. So I'm approaching now the Italian border. Usually that would not be an issue at all, but in these COVID times, it's often difficult to enter a new country and to come back from this country. So I prefer to just do the border crossing in the air and also return by air. So I don't really continue much into Italy, this way avoiding all the pandemic restrictions and not being responsible for further spreading the virus. So I do climb out on this hill in Italy and I slowly work my way up. Now we have up in the altitude a bit of westerly wind, so you can see the thermal tracks me quite a bit backwards. And then I push again into the wind and try to reconnect with the thermals that are maybe a bit stronger that come up the slope. Ultimately, I max out the thermal and I go back and fly towards Switzerland again. And I can now profit of all the altitude that I have collected and just cruise along these cliff faces in lifty air. And I'm much higher than when we flew into this valley. So now it's really kind of easy peasy flying. It's quite relaxed and I can enjoy the view. In front of me there is my friend marking some of the thermals, and soon enough there is the beautiful lake coming up, so all good views to enjoy. We're approaching a next big valley crossing, but we cannot really climb out any further than we could before because of the inversion that is approaching again here. So my friend chose a line more to the right in the south facing slope where we came from, but now I think the sun has shifted quite a bit, so I'm approaching more this west facing slope and I climb up immediately, as you can see. Interestingly enough, it was quite a good move to go to this west facing slope here because I could thermal much higher than where we came before. I think this is also has something to do with a bit different air mass, so here we're still a bit more in the mountains and I can climb above the ridge line, whereas in front the air mass comes more from the lake. You're much more in the inversion, and my friend could actually not climb out to the top here but had to go on the crossing quite low. But in any case, it's very early in the season, so Even if you cross slow, you didn't get punished. You didn't get stuck in the valley wind because there was almost no valley wind at all. So we both could do this crossing without any problems. You can see some pilots flying way higher than I am, so they are above the inversion, but here it's really difficult to punch through it. So I don't really find a good climb, so just continue racing along the slopes. I try to climb here and there, but it's not really anything high yielding. So I'm just looking that I can maintain my altitude. Whereas you can see there are some pilots that are high above me, but I cannot reach them. They're really out of reach because they're above the inversion, and at this point I cannot climb through the inversion. Hence I keep on flying and look for an opportunity to punch through this inversion layer. And here I do hook finally a good climb which takes me up above the ridge line, and it does look very promising that I can pass this inversion layer and get high enough to make it all the way back home. So with this we almost made it to the end of the video because the camera ultimately froze in these bitter cold conditions which we had, so up to minus 15 degrees. We do this last glide over. I hope you enjoyed it and see you next time.